Okay, perfect. So, guys, welcome to Cycle Tracking Without Obsessing. If you're here, I mean, you're probably in my world a little bit and you know a bit about me. I will give you a bit of an intro, but basically, who this is for, I'm going to make some assumptions about you. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But cycle tracking and this deep understanding of your body and a kind of constant finger on the pulse of your menstrual cycle in general, but wellness, I would say more broadly, tends to attract a very specific type of person. So I'm assuming, you're probably very health conscious. You probably succeeded in a lot of areas of life. You love control. You're a perfectionist. I'm all of these things. I'm also a Virgo. So I very much fit the bill. And you're probably a little bit obsessive. So we love the self-awareness that if you're going to get into some kind of method that is so personal, right? It's so intimate. It's so sensitive because, fertility is a very, very sensitive topic, and just in the news it's not hot statistics. Like, we're not hearing great things about fertility trends and fertility outcomes. So there's very much this tendency to get a little too obsessive in the tracking space, and I've done my best to create an antidote to that, one that is highly, highly empowering, gives you an advanced understanding of the knowledge and the biology behind the method itself so that you can kind of coast. I call this like lazy girl tracking, which is what I do today. And ultimately, my goal is to give you such a solid foundation that you can get there too when it comes to keeping tabs on your body for the rest of your reproductive health life. So I say you're probably interested in actual self-care because we all kind of know about Band-Aid self-care. And this self-care is the kind that puts you in partnership with your body. So a constant two-way conversation, not just you throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping this fixes my pain or this fixes my PMS or this helps me get pregnant. Like, no, you have very direct feedback and you're in a feedback loop. We also know fundamentally, I think a lot of people have widely accepted this, that our body's always constantly communicating with us. Like, we know this, but we probably haven't found like an accurate, reliable way to hear it. So like, okay, so what are you telling me? How do I interpret it? How do I decode it? And how do I respond properly? And I say all that because that's me too. So I always say I have like the least unique, the most basic story of how I've gotten into this space because I've heard my own story repeated back to me like probably 100 times at this point, where I struggled with terrible, severe period pain, severe hormonal acne, not cute acne, terrible acne. And as a teen, undiagnosed endometriosis, definitely, I was told birth control and Advil were my only options. Duh. And I listened and I did go on the pill for 6 years. And I'm not anti-birth control at all. But being so into health and wellness, like I'm assuming many of you are, that's what I chose to pursue. So my background is in biology. I have a master's in nutrition, and I now work for a personalized wellness biotechnology company as the director of science. So I'm very steeped in the science, like human anatomy, health world. And despite all that education, I knew none of this. Like, and it stuns me too, because I'll work with medical residents or doctors who are like trying to learn this method for themselves or their patients, and they're like, yeah, I don't even get this either in my medical school training. So that's who this is for. I want to make that super clear because normally we hear like cycle tracking, and truly the method I'm going to be exposing you to today is called the fertility awareness method. But I don't like to call it that because it's for so much more than just fertility. People hear fertility, they think babies. This cycle tracking is for anyone who wants a clinically accurate daily health and hormone tracking method. That's truly what it is. And what knowing exactly what your hormones are doing and what your fertility status is that day lets you do is use it for birth control or use it as a really great method to try to conceive. So that's kind of why we get that. But really, the only reason you're able to do those things is because you know exactly what your body's doing every single day. So, like I said, it's a 99% effective form of natural birth control you can trust. I think it gets a really bad rep out there if it's like crunchy and it's unreliable and it's just something that you can easily mess up. It is something you can easily mess up if you don't know what you're doing. This is a method, it's user dependent, and has rules. But when you know those rules, life's good. So that's just the message I want to make super clear. Best method for trying to conceive because it's going to tell you your exact fertile window. It's going to tell you exactly if and when you ovulated. And then even beyond that, it's really useful for navigating postpartum and also perimenopause. So all the places along your life where you want a really good idea of what's going on with your hormones and your overall health, this is going to help you do that. And this is, I share this a lot. You've probably seen this. This is one of my charts. I'm going to be telling you exactly what all that crazy stuff on there is and what this app is that I use and what I recommend and why I don't like certain apps that are really popular today with, defensible justification behind it. So that's what you're in for. And stick around for like a mini mission essentially for how you can start doing this today. So this is the current vibe. What I see, what I was, people are overwhelmed by information. On one hand, I love that there are so many like period influencers and cycle syncing, pretty little schedules, and feminine energy movement. Like that's amazing. Like we do need that. But it is frustrating at how even such well-intentioned content like that lacks a fundamental understanding of the reproductive system and what you're actually trying to get out of it. And I can see it almost working against people a lot of the time. And my goal is to have you skip that. So skip the anxiety, skip the frustration, skip the wheel spinning, and just go straight to the stuff that works. Body symptom math, not mathing. This would be like everyone recommending you magnesium, everyone recommending you CoQ10, everyone recommending you fish oil. Like for these certain symptoms, you try it, it doesn't work. You're like, what the hell? So you're spending all this money on supplements, all this money on devices and fixes, but it's just like, I can't tell if this is actually working or is it like one of the other 50 things I tried. This elucidates that for you. Tired of being recommended birth control. So often, not only in trying to avoid pregnancy situations are we recommended birth control, but really if you go to your doctor with any kind of hormonal issue, this is what they're going to punt you to. And it's unfortunate. There are better ways. There are better fertility options than getting shuttled to IVF. So really common if someone is struggling with fertility and they've been trying without success, they go in for the reproductive endocrinologist and they're told, okay, listen, like it's been this long, let's get you on the IVF list without ever addressing, okay, what's going on hormonally? Is this something we can address? And I gotta tell you, like 9 times out of 10 it is. And like I said, the doctor just doesn't know. This is not me shitting on doctors. It's just purely this is an education gap. And then what it results in is people either stomaching the reproductive issues, so just dealing with the fact that you feel like you got hit by a train the week before your period, because what else are you supposed to do? Or trying to figure it out themselves. And guys, let me just tell you, I went on Reddit for 20 minutes this week to just get examples like this. Like what are people actually dealing with? I have 3 slides of this. This is from the last 6 days. So a lot of the times people get into charting. This is kind of the the sequence of events. They're all recommended this book, TCOYF, Taking Charge of Your Fertility. I have it here. It's a great book. But the thing is, oh shoot, my blur's on. But this thing is a textbook, guys. Like this is not something like even highly educated women who are like, great, let me like figure this out myself are dealt like now you give me this like I don't even know 600 page textbook that I now have to piecemeal through and then figure out how to understand everything and interpret it. But they do. So this app you see here, or like this template, this is similar to what I have people use and what I use myself. It's just kind of like a basic template that you add information to so that you can interpret what's going on. This is called Fertility Friend. It's usually really tightly linked. If someone does the TCOYF method, they're going to use this. So what's going on is you can learn how to track. This is what they're mostly looking at is like temperature shifts and cervical mucus patterns. And that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. But where it just leaves you in the lurch is like, how do you make sense of the information when it doesn't look like a beautiful, predictable chart? Because unfortunate newsflash, most people don't have perfectly healthy cycles. And I think you know this too. Like, otherwise, if you've ever struggled with pain or with PMS symptoms or with weird spotting or like prolonged bleeding or super long cycles, you're not going to have a nicely interpretable chart. There's some kind of hormonal issue going on at base that needs to be addressed, and it's causing wonky stuff to happen. So maybe you have crazy temps. Maybe you don't actually know how to confirm ovulation when it happens. So you're looking at all this data and you're like, I don't know how to interpret it. Or like you think everything's going to plan and then you still see fertile cervical mucus after ovulation. Is that normal? You don't have anyone to ask because no one knows. Because no one knows. Um, so that's one example, okay, of just struggling to interpret the information that you're trying to collect. And then, we love living in 2026. I love my Aura Ring, and we have a lot of tech options. So what about the tech, Michelle? Kind of the same problem. So some screenshots here. These are natural cycles, which I got beef with. I'll explain why. I take all of this with a grain of salt. I have natural cycles because it's the way I get my temperature for my Aura Ring, again, because I'm a lazy girl. But do I trust it for birth control? No. That's why I say I had beef with it, because I would not trust this for birth control. I don't recommend trusting it for birth control, but I think it's a great way to get information and it's a pretty app. So this is kind of what can happen. So it'll tell you ovulated one day and then, potentially the algorithm shifts because that's what's being fed. It's not your body information, it's a predictive algorithm. And it can change your date of ovulation on you. If you don't know how to actually pinpoint your own ovulation date, this can really throw you off. Again, what if you have a long cycle, variable temperatures, you're not looking out for other key primary fertile signs, and you just don't know what to do with the, beautiful amount of information in front of you. This tech is called Mira, if you've heard like Mira or Anito, and these are devices that what's amazing is you test your urine in the morning and it will give you literal hormone levels. So theoretically, this is basically like a step beyond the method that I teach, because I teach you how to understand primary fertile signs as proxies of hormonal status, which they are. But this is literally giving you a direct result every day. But in the vein of everything we've been talking about, even with this information, if you don't understand the basic biology of like reproductive health and what your reproductive system should and should not be doing at certain times of the cycle, when did I ovulate? They have no idea. And the tech is good, but it's not that good. So unfortunately, you can have a lot. I've worked with some people who have mirror data and it's beautiful, it's helpful, but unfortunately, they kind of end up in the same place as a lot of people who aren't using these fancy devices. And then we have when it all conflicts with each other. So for people trying to conceive, one of the most common things to do is use an ovulation predictor kit. And what that does is it senses, which we'll talk about the hormones in a sec. It essentially is just sensing your LH level, your luteinizing hormone, which is going to surge right before ovulation. So about, 24 to 36 hours before you ovulate, you will have this LH surge. Now, wait, let me say it and be super clear. LH is not a primary fertile sign. It's a secondary fertile sign. So if you're like, I want to test the strips, this is what I want to do, this is what everyone else does, cool, do it, but do not let it be the only thing you're looking at because it will confuse you. What about when Anita detects high fertility, but your OPK is not positive? What about when you have a positive ovulation test, so you have just the presence of LH for 5 days straight? That could mean something else hormonally. Um, Actually, what that could be is in the context of PCOS, people tend to have chronically elevated LH levels. So if you go to use this method and you're someone with PCOS, you just get false positives a lot of the time. But again, no one tells you that. So this is why understanding it's so important. So let's clear it up. There are many different fertility awareness methods. So one that I talk about is not the only one out there. But the one that we'll be talking about today, the one that I use, the one that I'm trained in as a practitioner, is called the symptothermal method. This is the one that when I cite that 99.4% effective method of birth control study, this is the method that they were using. So it sounds like a crazy word, but when you break it down, refers to checking your cervical mucus patterns, and this is done externally Some people kind of freak out. You don't have to go sticking your fingers in anywhere if you don't want to. For cervical mucus, this is done via an external check. And thermal refers to your basal body temperature patterns. So these are two primary fertile signs. We talked about how LH was secondary. Your cervical mucus and your basal body temperature are primary fertile signs that proxy your major reproductive hormones. So that's all we're doing with this method. We're looking at very clear, easy to read fertile signs your body is already giving you. And we can understand from your cervical mucus patterns what your estrogen is doing, and from your basal body temperature patterns what your progesterone is doing. And these are kind of the dominant hormones at like the pre-ovulatory and the post-ovulatory parts of your cycle. So if this sounds like a lot, kind of the undertone of this that I've been saying again and again is that the secret is all this only feels scary, confusing, or obsessive when the foundations are skipped. You're going to track better when you understand more, and you're going to drive yourself crazy and go on Reddit and beg a couple strangers who don't. The answers are just as bad, guys. Some of them are good. Some of them are good, but some of them stressed me out more. And I said, Michelle, don't do it. Do not make a troll Reddit account and help these people out. But you know what? I did it because I just can't. And even that, let me say this because now I'm getting myself aside, but I was so excited to do that when I knew that this subreddit existed. I'm like, I'm gonna be able to help all these people with their charts. I'm gonna be able to like, be the good Samaritan that helps them understand if there's something wrong. I can't do that. I can't do that because when I looked at these charts with a trained eye, it's so clear that the people who are charting this way without the proper education aren't even charting correctly. So I cannot trust that the information that they're putting on that chart was actually capturing the correct kind of cervical mucus, or are they doing the proper like temperature rules? And that's why they're seeing like, do they actually have variable temperature or are they just like taking their temperature wrong? So I really can't be the person I wanted to be for the one-off scenarios, but I can be that person when someone has taught the method correctly from start to finish. So that was kind of a bummer when I wanted to like be a little superwoman on Reddit. Um, uh, I won't lie to you, yesterday I did do that because it was like in more easy scenarios. I was like, I just have to tell them, I just have to put them in the right train of thought or like send them with the right resource because it will give them the answer, hopefully. But that's what we're up against today. It's just a lot of misinformation and a lot of information gaps. So here's where we start with reproductive biology. This is going to be your necessary foundation to accurate tracking. So basically, sex ed, the cool version, is what I'm going to do with you today. And if you've ever come to one of my live events before, you know I do this every single freaking time because the human brain really does need to hear a piece of information a series of times before it really gets it. So that's like a neuroscience reason I do this, but also just purely from the importance of this. Like when I'm working with one-on-one clients for a period of 3 months, we start with this and then we fall back to this. Because if anything funky pops up and they're like, whoa, what does this mean? How do I interpret that? I saw this crazy thing happen yesterday in my underwear. Like, what is that? You can always fall back in the biology. Like, what hormone is happening? Like, what does this tell us about this? What does this entail? Are you low? Are you insufficient here? This is what it could be a sign of. The biology is always the fallback. So, female reproductive anatomy 101, we have your vulva, the outside, which the tunnel that goes from the outside up to the cervix, called the vagina. We're all comfortable, I think, with this. We have our two ovaries that make the eggs, and the process of making the eggs and ovulating the eggs is the superstar. It's the whole point. So, we're going to be talking about that in more detail. But essentially, what happens is they're creating the developing cohort of follicles every cycle. The winner gets ovulated outside of the ovary and picked up by the fallopian tube. The little fimbriae of the fallopian tube move that egg on through. If fertilization happens, it will happen in the fallopian tube. If not, egg just keeps passing on through. And then the uterus, throughout the course of the month, is proliferating. So cells are dividing, dividing, dividing. They're growing, making this a very hospitable place for a potentially fertilized egg. If not, at the end of the cycle, that uterine lining sheds and That's what we call our bleed. Now, what I liked about this diagram, and it's kind of rare because if you pull up one of these images, often the cervix is just like a stopgap. But in reality, it looks more like this. It's like a distinct structure, and it's a very important one. So when I keep saying the term cervical mucus to you, it's really important to know that that is made, of course, in the cervix. So your cervix has a series of crypts, and they're going to produce cervical mucus. And cervical mucus is essentially the thing that gets us in our fertile window. So the presence of cervical mucus allows sperm that would otherwise die in a very acidic vagina to stay alive. So not only does it let them stay alive thanks to the more hospitable pH, but your cervix has these crypts which act like sperm hotels. So they're like essentially, if you have any unprotected sex during your fertile window, cervical mucus is present to keep them alive. They can chill inside the sperm hotels for up to 5 days. That's how long they can survive in cervical mucus and await an ovulated egg to try to fertilize it. So the cervix is actually like a major player. And we're never taught that. We're like never taught how important it is. We're kind of just taught that it's the separation point between the uterus and the vagina. But no, like this is the thing that makes everything else happen. If ovulation is a one-time event, why do we have a 6-day fertile window? Cervical mucus. So let's try to get a really good understanding of the hormones that are happening. Because really, like we said, the hormonal changes are the thing that we're watching with the symptothermal method. So inside the ovary, what's happening is at the start of every cycle, so say during your period, your brain is sending your ovary the message, hey guys, time to make a new cohort for the next cycle. And it does that via follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, which literally right in the name is like, hey, stimulate them follicles, get them growing so that we can ovulate again. So that's what's happening. You have a bunch of them developing, so going from primary, secondary, to later stage follicles. And this development, there's like an early follicular development, and then the follicular development that happens during that cycle itself. So you may have heard like, oh, it takes 3 months to optimize egg quality, which true, that's that more major, like second developmental stage, but there is a more initial developmental stage. So really like what you do with the 8 months before you ovulate an egg affects the quality of that egg. So the the egg you ovulate in this cycle, you really started impacting it with your health and your lifestyle 8 months ago. So really crucially important. 3 months is like solid, but just from a biology standpoint, you really influence the quality of your eggs and thus the quality of your cycle because they're not two different things months in advance. So essentially, we get to a very developed cohort of follicles. And what's key to know is that as these things are growing, they're spitting out estrogen. So that estrogen rise that everyone talks about when we're moving like into ovulation after you finish your period, like in your follicular phase, because the follicles are developing. So there we go. It's very easy to remember. They're spitting out estrogen, which everyone's like, that's the thing that makes you more creative and makes you want to communicate and makes you be Beyonce and makes you. This is all stuff that's on the internet. Not you've probably heard it too, which is great because I mean it's accurate. This is definitely like a very energizing hormone. And if you are scheduling your life and your business around your cycle, this is when you would want to do those really like high communication oriented things. For instance, that's the phase I'm in right now. Not that I kind of schedule it around that, to be super honest, but I like to do these frequently, so it doesn't always work out that way. So that estrogen rises thanks to these follicles. It's not coming from your brain, it's not coming from somewhere else, it's coming from your ovary, thanks to these guys. And then the dominant follicle, the one that gets ovulated, gets spit out, like we talked about, gets sucked up by the fallopian tube, but it leaves something behind. And the structure that was around the egg that it leaves behind is called the corpus luteum, which is where we get luteal phase. So the egg is making its journey, right? But that thing, the little sac that the egg left behind, what it's doing now is making progesterone. So the progesterone rise that we're going to talk about, which tells you, which is the thing that raises your basal body temperature, dries up your cervical mucus, and essentially gives you the ability to confirm that you ovulated, is being made by this guy too. So all of these like key reproductive hormones, they tell you how healthy was this follicle, right? Because the healthier this follicle is, the stronger and more developed it is, the better it's going to be at producing estrogen. And then thus the healthier the egg is going to be that gets ovulated, and thus the healthier the corpus luteum is that gets left behind that makes the progesterone. So the better level of progesterone you're going to have in the luteal phase, which is the thing that lets us not get really bad PMS symptoms. Like this is all just so beautifully connected, and it's literally like all on your ovary. So that's what's happening hormonally. And then this thing lasts, so the proper life cycle of a corpus luteum is about 12 to 14 days. So the time that you are in your menstrual phase of the luteal phase from the day of ovulation to the start of your next period should be every month between 12 and 14 days. If it's any less, which often it is, but most people don't know they even have this unless they're tracking, tells us that you have some form of progesterone insufficiency, and there are ways we can support it, absolutely. Like I said, it's very common, and the methods to boost progesterone tend to be really accessible. So it's nutrition focused, lifestyle focused, it's supplementation, it's sleep protocols, like all the things that feel very basic, but when you track and you see that luteal phase lengthen within a cycle or two, it's very impactful. It's also like motivating to kind of see that almost instant gratification of what's happening in your cycle. Amazing. So this is probably what you're used to seeing. This is the graph. What I really like about this is it puts it all together. So like we talked about, the developing follicle, spitting out, spitting out, spitting out estrogen, you're feeling really good. When estrogen hits a certain threshold, that's the trigger for the LH surge, the strips that I talked about earlier. That's what's going to surge this LH, and then the LH surge is the trigger event for ovulation. So we talked about it, usually like 24 to 36 hours before ovulation, you'll see this positive LH surge. And then once ovulation happens, that's when that corpus luteum, that's still in the ovary, makes that progesterone. And you see that reflected in your basal body temperature. So what we're looking at when we're tracking basal body temperature is this thermal shift. So you have your relatively lower pre-ovulatory temps. Once ovulation happens, you do see a clear rise in your basal body temperature. And this is one way we're able to confirm ovulation. One thing I want to point out, and this is for all textbooks, this is for basically every cycle syncing graph out there, is they like to do this shit. They like to say that ovulation always happens on day 14. And your app is going to assume this. Your doctor is going to assume this, even to the point that they'll assume when they calculate your due date that you ovulated on day 14. Your basically everything ever, I mean, it's a problem because not everyone does ovulate on day 14. So that's why I put the X here. I'm going to tell you exactly why that's not true in the next slide, but just please know going forward in your brain, if you see anyone's sharing like a cycle syncing graph or a template or a schedule that has these like activities that you can do at different parts of your cycle, and it's like day 11 to 14, da 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 da, day 15 to da, ignore it. Ignore it unless you know for sure that you have a perfect 28-day cycle. Which, we're human beings. Like, no one ever has the exact same cycle length every single time. No one ever ovulates on the exact same day every single month. I promise you, promise you, promise you. Track, you'll find out. So that's like putting it all together in a beautiful, beautiful visual. So why predictive algos? I always kind of get ahead of myself with my rants, but why predictive algorithms suck? So if you use like Clue, Flow, those are the major ones. Yeah, there are even natural cycles to an extent do that have this predictive algorithm of like, oh, you're in your fertile window. Oh, you likely ovulated today. This is what they're using. They're using, even if it's a robust data set, it's predictive. It takes nothing of your own body's fertile signs into account. And the traditional cycle syncing calendars that assume a textbook 28-day cycle, they lie. They lie because if you are someone with a 28-day cycle, here's the structure of a menstrual cycle and what actually happens when they're different lengths. Even if you have a longer cycle, you don't ovulate on day 14. A longer cycle, so longer than 28 days is the example I'm using here. What it really means is you ovulate later. Why? Because that luteal phase, remember we just talked about the corpus luteum, that's hinging on the life cycle of that thing that the egg left behind. So it's always going to be 12 to 14 days. Always. Or it could be a little longer, it could be shorter, but again, it's rare to have it longer, but possible. More commonly, you would see it shorter, but that indicates an underlying hormonal insufficiency. But it's a relatively fixed phase of the cycle. The follicular phase, so the pre-ovulatory cycle, that can change. That responds to your life. So it's more variable. If you traveled or you got sick or you have like a period of time where you're really stressed out and your period came at a different time, what changed was your pre-ovulatory phase. Your body sensed this stress. It sensed like I have to dedicate resources elsewhere because that's really what it is. At the end of the day, your reproductive system is your least valuable system to your body, and it will divert any oxygen, nutrients, energy it needs away to other parts in times of stress, be it sickness, be it travel, be it like, a busy time of year, busy time of your life. This is why we see hormonal changes crop up in a lot of women because we're just like constantly diverting energy away from it. And your body says, okay, cool, optional. I can turn this off so you can keep on living. Clearly, you're stressed out. This is the first thing to go. So, even in healthy individuals, I mean, a healthy cycle can be anywhere from 25 to 35 days, typically. So even at baseline, you're someone who has a consistent 32-day cycle, that's fine. Like that's considered to be healthy. But what it means is you can't take that cycle syncing template and use it for your own advantage because you've actually ovulated closer to like day 19. So if you were trying to do all the fun, like energetic activity stuff here, I mean, that would probably been fine. But when everyone's telling you to rest and do the strength training and the yoga, like you're actually vibing the most. So you should be out there, being your most productive and in social settings and doing all the things that are highly creative, but you wouldn't know that unless you knew exactly what was going on in your own cycle. So really the easiest way to explain it is that ovulation is the star here. The hormonal changes that happen, the physiological changes that happen, the whole reason we have a menstrual cycle in the first place is revolving around ovulation. So the key is we need to just figure out when that happens, if it's happening. So ovulation, just again, basic biology, the fundamentals, it can only happen once per cycle. So there have been published PubMed ID papers, not recently, but they exist that say women can ovulate multiple times per cycle. Now that we know is not true anymore. But it doesn't stop the misinformation that's out there that there are some people that are very convinced you can ovulate multiple times. Say you get pregnant, like there's a risk that you could get pregnant again because of subsequent ovulation. That's not possible. If you could ovulate more than once per cycle, this method would not work. We would not be able to do this. We would not be able to use the biology the way that we do. So that's crucial to know. You can ovulate multiple eggs per cycle. Like, so you have one ovulatory event, but two eggs come through and then you can have paternal twins. That's like the only semi exception, but it's really not an exception because ovulation is a one-time event. And the egg can only live 12 to 24 hours if it's not fertilized, and then your body essentially like reuses that material. So we are infertile more times than we're fertile. So once that egg is gone, the rest of your cycle is an infertile period. So, how do we know when our 6-day fertile window is? The method. Why do we have a 6-day fertile window? We talked about this earlier, but I'll say it again. It's because of cervical mucus. So the presence of it keeps that sperm alive for up to 5 days. So anytime you have unprotected sex and there's cervical mucus present, the sperm could stay alive and it can chill in the cervix hotels until you ovulate. So if you see cervical mucus, that's a fertile day. In our world, there are different types of cervical mucus. You've probably just been told it's all vaginal discharge, which is not the case. There's a way to identify, there's a way to classify, and there's a way to notate cervical mucus. And that's what you get taught in the method. But what's cool with all of those things too tell you a very different, they give you health, they map to health outcomes. So certain patterns you would see in the presence of inflammation, certain patterns you would see in the presence of low estrogen. So you really can pick up a lot of different health cues from these two simple fertile signs. So back to the method. Tracking your bleed, your temperature, and your cervical mucus is really going to give us really precise insight on not only proxies of your hormone levels, but the length and quality of your period is a biomarker of your cycle. So, what is your pain like? How much do you bleed? Do you have spotting? All of these, again, map to different health issues that we can then solve. What does your fertile window look like? What's the timing of it? Is it consistent? Are there any abnormalities? Do you never see cervical mucus, or is it like one day of cervical mucus? Is it scant? What does it, is that color to it? Like there is just so much information we can get from it and then optimize based on that. Your overall cycle length, like I said, anything 24, 25 days to 35 days is considered healthy. But do you vary? Like, is it too variable? Do you have days that are months that are 28-day cycles and other cycles that are 42 days? Like that also tells us something. It's a red flag. Hey, we need to address this. This is worthy of investigation. How long is your luteal phase? Well, for that, you would need to understand when you ovulate and then count the number of days that it takes until your next period comes. That's a very informational piece of like biomarker of your cycle too. Ovulation, when is it happening? Is it even happening? You can bleed, believe it or not, without having ovulated. And it's not considered a true period. A true period is just the definition of a period that comes after ovulation happens. That's all that means. But you can have a sort of withdrawal bleed that comes kind of like clockwork. That would you would assume to be your period if you actually weren't tracking if ovulation even happened. It's definitely possible. So that's like these are all the things that we understand when you get to know your cycle like this. So you need cervical mucus to open up your fertile window. And this is, I'll explain to you my beef with natural cycles, because this is where the danger of unintended pregnancy lies. Natural cycles uses one biomarker and one biomarker from you only, and that's your temperature, which is amazing to close the fertile window, right? Because you need to ovulate to get that rise in progesterone, to get that rise in basal body temperature. It is useless for opening the fertile window. Your temp does not help you at all to determine that information for when your body starts making the fertile cervical mucus. That only you know. So I, being someone with a healthy, generally regular healthy cycle, who does have natural cycles, had two instances now where it would have screwed me over if I didn't know what I was doing. It gave me safe days on days that I saw fertile cervical mucus. So I knew my fertility that day was fertile. I was in my fertile window. But if I had trusted that app, yikes, this is where people get misled. So that's my hesitation with natural cycles as birth control. It's using a predictive algorithm to open that fertile window. I think it's actually gotten better in the sense that I see it being more and more conservative with that opening. But regardless, this is information that people should have about their own body anyway. So we use temperature and cervical mucus to cross-check, close the fertile window, confirm ovulation with not one but two biomarkers, because there's a way to confirm ovulation with cervical mucus as well as temperature. And like I mentioned before, every pattern is mapping to a different area of your health. So this is just like a constant finger on your pulse of your like reproductive health, yes, but total body health too. So if you have low baseline temps, that could be a thyroid or a metabolism issue. If we see consistent dampness when you check for cervical mucus, that can indicate the presence of cervical dysplasia, which puts you at increased risk of cervical cancer. But the good news is cervical dysplasia is reversible. So it exists on a spectrum. If you have like a history of negative pap smears, that's great. Like, but if you could still have like low grade cervical dysplasia, that this method would catch that a pap smear would not. And then scant mucus or non-optimal cervical mucus patterns that could indicate low levels of estrogen that we would need to look at as well. So this back to again, all right, I'm going to give you my method and my example. This app, because a lot of people ask me, is called Read Your Body. It's essentially just a blank template. So you could do this on the app. I'm, like I said, lazy girl tracking. I like to automate things, but you could also do this on paper. So I have templates for paper as well, if you'd like to do it that way. And all it is it's just what's beautiful about this. I know I say I hate apps and I'm like, but I use an app. This is not predictive at all. This is truly just a place where you can put your own information and interpret it yourself. So it's not going to send you a ping, it's not going to send you insights, it's not going to estimate anything. That's what I had beef with. So just to show you, obviously this I can't teach you today because it is just like does take like the a better part of a month of the first month that I work with people to really train them on how to do this. But I have to tell you, everyone picks, it looks scary, but everyone picks this up within like a cycle or two. It's really accessible when you get in the habit of it and hit that learning curve. But really, this is just a way to categorize and notate everything that comes out of your vagina and then understand what it means in a health context. So just because I want to show you how we confirm ovulation, the temperature is easy. Right. So essentially what you want to see is a sustained thermal shift. So at least three consistently high temps after ovulation. So we have a way to draw this baseline, but essentially, do we see a clear shift in temperature pre-ovulatory compared to post-ovulatory? And does it stay high for at least 3 days? So that would be one way to confirm ovulation. We do the similar method with cervical mucus. So there are different definitions of cervical mucus. The two overarching definitions are called peak and non-peak, which purely are definition based. Peak just means it's clear or stretchy or lubricative. So if you've ever heard of like egg whitey fertile mucus, that's what this is. And non-peak just means any kind of cervical mucus that is not that. So it does not indicate fertile, like more or less fertile. Like, oh, I saw the non-peak whitey pasty mucus today, so I'm not that fertile. No, no, because like we said before, the presence of any cervical mucus can keep sperm alive and keep them in the hotels for up to 5 days. So therein, all mucus is fertile mucus. We just use these two definitions because peak does mean that you are closer to ovulation. So what we do here is we classify peak and non-peak mucus. The last day you saw peak mucus is considered your peak day. And then do we see a series of days where you have dried up? So either no mucus or are you seeing non-peak mucus but not peak mucus? And that's essentially we do the same thing. Do you have that for 3 days? If that's true, then after 3 days, we close the fertile window and you're considered infertile again until the start of your next period. So already looking at this one chart of mine, I'm looking at like six different things as far as health metrics. So temperature, ovulation timing, luteal phase length. How does the matchup of your temperature and your cervical mucus go? Because this was a nice example of, them like this 3 day count happening more or less on the same day. What if they're totally different? What do you do in that case? And that could be possible in the case of a hormone mismatch. So, like maybe estrogen is surging at one point and you don't ovulate until later and you don't really know how to make sense of it. This allows us to make sense of it and do things to bring them closer and closer together. So, more and more in alignment as we heal your menstrual cycle. As a whole, you'll start to see these patterns normalize. So, what I want to leave you with today is a quick way you could start doing any of this. So, depending on where you are, if you're on birth control or not on birth control or different types of birth control, and you have questions about, what can I do, what can I not do reach out to me. I have personalized mini missions for like all the different applications of this cycle. So, or cycle syncing method. So, birth control would be different than fertility, would be different than if you're trying to solve a hormonal or period issue, or could be different than if you're more interested in cycle syncing. So, I can personalize that to you. So, just like ways you could literally start doing this today. But for everybody, one thing I would love to recommend is downloading. You could download the app I use called Read Your Body. It's not free, unfortunately. It's like $2 and change a month. Or you could use paper, which is free and very safe. I mean, the Read Your Body app from a data perspective is quite safe, but I don't know the world we live in today. Everyone is probably right to be concerned about everything. So you can use paper if you want to. And then start making note of what you may have previously considered to be discharge. What does it look like? Does it come in a pattern? So once you start paying attention to it, it's fascinating. Like when I first started paying attention to it, I was like, oh my God, this does come cyclically. What do you know? I just thought it was all random. But what is the pattern it's coming in? Do you see it at certain points of your cycle? What does it look like? Is it clear? Is it shiny? Is it stretchy? Or is it goopy and gummy? Is it pasty? These are all telling you things about what the heck your hormones are doing. And it's giving you a clear kind of playbook to get them into the realm of optimized. So you can put this in your notes section. There's a notes section in your Read Your Body app, or you could put it in the notes section of if you're using any current app today. So say you use Flu. I literally combined it the only two ways you could. Clue or Flow, or even Apple Health. Like there are always like symptom tracking spots that you could put this in. And my question to you would be, can you start to categorize it? Can you even start to notice it? So already the awareness is like a really good habit to get into. And then if you do have one of those predictive apps, how does it match the ovulation day that it gives you? That's always a fun exercise. And then, like I mentioned, if you want a more personalized mission, do reach out because again, the method's the same, but the application could change depending on what you're most interested for, or like the the biological route that you might be most concerned with that I can kind of point you in the right direction of. So with that, I believe that's everything. Thank you all so much for your hour of time on this Friday afternoon. We've got 5 minutes left about. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. If you don't, that's cool too, but this is something I really love to talk about. So, if you do have any questions, please, I could yap about this all day. It's so helpful. Thank you so much. You're so welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm so happy you guys are interested. You learn something new every time. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, you know what? I do too. I think that's the mark of this field as a whole. Like no one is ever not learning something new all the time because if you are, it's kind of a red flag. Just because this field, like the research is kind of in its infancy and it's getting better, but I'm constantly learning new things that blow my mind and forgetting all the things that already blew my mind and that exposing this to people who've like never heard any of this. I'm like, oh my gosh, are we just all getting our mind blown all the time? Session has been so insightful. Okay, amazing. Well, you guys are the best. You're just so incredibly smart. But if you have any, think of anything or you try the little mini mission and you find something cool or you don't, I do want to hear about it. So good luck with all of it and have an amazing weekend. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you, guys.